Everybody who collects Western figures is familiar with those tiny little peg holes in the bottoms of figures' feet. Most companies do them. However, few companies actually make peg stands that work for them. A lot of companies that make these figures with the little peg holes don't make any peg stands at all, and some of them don't even have standard-sized peg holes across the figures in their own lines. So you wind up with situations where you can have 3 Marvel Legends figures that have between them 5 or 6 different peg hole sizes on their feet. It's crazy. There's just so many variables to account for in these, and most people that actually manufacture them only account for one. So you wind up in this situation where you look at peg stands, but they only work with this guy and not that guy, or they work with those but not these. So you don't buy any at all, and then one day you're going to walk past your display a little too fast, or you're going to step a little too hard, and boom, figure avalanche. Basically what I'm getting at is that the peg stand market for figures is crap, and that's why I designed these. I call this the Hex Base. There are 3 major differences between the Hex Base and a typical peg stand. The first major difference is that there are 3 pegs of varying sizes on the Hex Base, whereas a typical peg stand usually only has 1 peg of one size. This means that the Hex Base has much more compatibility across figure lines and within figure lines than your typical peg stand could ever have. The second major difference is that the pegs themselves are bar-shaped rather than round. Bar-shaped pegs allow for a bit more compatibility with certain non-circular peg holes you find on some figures, and it also gives the pegs some wiggle room in case of sudden shock or sudden movement inside of the peg hole on the figure's foot, so that in the event of that occurring, the force won't all just go to the base of the peg, which would increase the chance for that peg to snap. The third major difference is the shape of the base itself. The hexagonal shape allows it to tessellate cleanly and optimize your space in your display, while also being more stable than some of the other base shapes that are used in other peg stands. Obviously, the first thing that you're going to ask when you look at a peg stand is what lines is this going to be compatible with? So I did a whole lot of compatibility testing, and here are some of the lines of figures that the Hex Base is compatible with. Given that the Hex Base covers a pretty good range of peg sizes, there's probably more compatibility than I'm missing, I just wasn't able to test for it. I did do extensive testing with these lines. I tested as many figures as I could get access to for these lines, but that being said, while the testing showed that compatibility should be very, very high, it might not be truly universal, as there could always be exceptions to the rule. Some figures in a line might have very odd specifications, or if you go back far enough, the specifications might be different from before, or they could change in the future. So while compatibility does appear to be very, very high, it will probably not be truly universal. The next thing that you'd want to know is, what's the stability like? Are these actually going to keep my figures upright? And the answer is yes. The stability testing came out very positive, and in many cases when a failure did occur, it occurred because the figure's own ankle joints gave out first and toppled the figure before the base actually toppled itself. Of course, I know that you also want to know how durable these are, so let's break some. In testing, the most surefire way I found to break these is to take a figure and force it down onto a peg that's too large for its peg hole, because then, since it's too tight and there's nowhere for the peg to actually move in the socket, you're going to wind up putting all of the force on the base of the peg, and that'll increase your chances of snapping it. If you do manage to snap it off in a figure's foot, you are in luck, because the bar design is much easier to remove than the typical round pegs, as you have that nice room on the side to just go in with a pair of tweezers and pull them right out. And then you're going to have still two pegs that are usable with other figures, so it's not like the base would be a total loss if you did break one. As these are different from typical peg stands, there is something of a method of procedure you should follow when using them with a figure for the first time. The 3 pegs on the Hex Base are arranged going clockwise from smallest to largest, so you have small, medium, and large. When using a figure with the Hex Base for the first time, you should take the figure and first try them in the small, then if that is too loose, the medium, and if that is too loose, the large. You shouldn't expect an incredibly tight fit, you just need a nice, firm fit. If it feels like you're forcing something down, you're using the wrong peg size, and you should not do that. The Hex Bases will be available for pre-order for the first time on canofbeams.com on Friday, January 11th. They'll be going up starting at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. For more information, please see canofbeams.com or @canofbeams on Instagram.